Sometimes it can feel like we're living in the end times. Wars in Ukraine and Gaza, cities flattened, awful videos of war. If you spent 5 minutes on the news or online, it's easy to believe that the world is falling apart. But are we? Are modern wars killing more people than ever? Are we really living through a violent time in history, or just the loudest? I'm Ken LaCourte. This is Elephants in Rooms, where I research the oddball questions and do my best to answer them fairly. We'll start by looking at today's wars to see how many people they actually kill. We'll look at major past wars, and then at how war changed post-World War II. Finally, we'll take a look at death rates through history. And we'll answer the question, are modern wars really killing more people than ever? Today, the news is mainly about Ukraine and Gaza. And they're certainly important, maybe geopolitically the most important. But are they the deadliest? But before that, I wanted to get into death statistics for a little bit about wars, because they're all over the place. First, in current conflicts, each side has a reason to lessen or exaggerate the number of people killed. And besides the number of people killed by violence, if you add on counts for things like disease that spread more because the healthcare system collapsed, you sometimes get radically wild variations. I'll pick what I think are the most accepted numbers, and I realize that it's hard to make any statement that's not controversial. Okay, so let's look at the wars that have gone on relatively recent, since the mid-90s. Ukraine is obviously still unfolding right now, and it's likely that between 50,000 and 100,000 people have died since Russia invaded. The war in Gaza, we're probably looking at over 60,000 people killed. Afghanistan dragged on for 20 years and left between 175,000 to 250,000 people dead. And many experts say that the second Gulf War killed up to 500,000 people. In Syria, over 500,000. Yemen, a war few people know about and even fewer understand, it's up to about 400,000. And then there are other wars that get almost no media attention. A civil war in Sudan, 150,000. Boko Haram in Nigeria, 350,000. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, we get these dicey numbers. Nearly 1 million people have been killed directly, but over 6 million people have died if you include the starvation, the disease, and all the problems that come with destroying a country. The combined death toll for wars since the mid-90s is estimated somewhere between 4 and 9 million people. That's about 0.11% of the world's population. But as awful as those numbers are, and they are, it's actually a lot fewer than many past wars. The history of the world routinely features killing humans by the tens of millions. Let's take a look at some of the highlights, if you can call it that, of some of the past major wars. In ancient China, around 220 AD, the empire collapsed into a brutal three-way power struggle called the Three Kingdoms War. Over 34 million people are believed to have been killed, which is up to 18% of the world's population. Think about that. Nearly 1 in 5 people on Earth died in a single conflict. If that scale happened today, we'd be talking about 1.5 billion people. Then came the Mongols and Genghis Khan. He didn't just conquer cities, he often erased them. Entire populations were slaughtered, sometimes down to the last child. The death toll ranges from, it's a wide number, but it's 10 to 60 million. That high end would be roughly 10% of humanity. Or the Taiping Rebellion in the 19th century China. By the time it ended, 20 to 30 million people were dead. That's more than twice the death toll of World War I. And look, I could keep going on, but you get the point. These early wars didn't have machine guns or bombs, but they went on for a very, very long time, sometimes decades, even turning famine into weapons and pulling a lot of people down with them. Then came the 20th century and World War I, which was sometimes called the war to end all wars, a slogan that really didn't hold up too well. But it did kill about 15 to 22 million people, roughly 1% of the global population. It also introduced modern horrors like tanks and bombers. And then, just 20 years later, it got worse. By absolute numbers, World War II was the deadliest conflict in human history. Between 70 and 85 million people were killed, about 3% of everyone alive. 25 million soldiers died, but most of the casualties, about another 50 million, were civilians. Germany's Holocaust murdered at least 11 million people. 6 million Jews and Roma, the disabled, political dissidents, and so many others. The Soviet Union alone lost 27 million people. Those are mind-blowing numbers to Americans in the West. In China, it was 15 to 20 million. Poland lost about 20% of its entire population. It's almost impossible to comprehend the scale, but here's some perspective. More people died in the 6 years of World War II than in all of the wars since then. over 80 years. So World War II is, so far, the war with the highest number of deaths ever recorded in history. And after it was over, the way humans approached warfare changed. And so far, that change has been for the good. Since World War II, the great powers haven't fought head-on once. But the Cold War ushered in a new kind of conflict called proxy wars. The US and the Soviet Union, they couldn't afford to fight each other directly, so leaders turned to other nations, they turned them into battlegrounds. And in the biggest wars that followed, Korea, Vietnam, China's Civil War, and others, as huge as the death counts were, compared to World War II and really other periods of world history, they were substantially smaller. Part of that is technology. It's changed things, with weapons like more accurate missiles and increasingly drones. Hey, this is a good time to tell you that this is a complicated story with lots of sometimes conflicting numbers. If I screw up, I'll correct it in a pinned comment below. So statistically, as much as it doesn't feel like it, and despite the horrors I described, we're living in one of the most peaceful stretches in human history, with the lowest death rates in war. It even has a name. Scholars call it the Long Peace. It was coined in the late 80s, and it describes a simple but important fact. The world's richest and most powerful countries haven't gone to war with each other since 1945. No US-Russia war, France-Germany, UK-China. And even though some of the wars going on today feel catastrophic, the long peace is still ongoing. The long peace doesn't mean no war at all. It means no wars between major powers that produce those even more horrific numbers. And also, when you look at the estimated number of deaths since the mid-90s, as I said, between 4 and 9 million people over the last 30 years, it's definitely lower than much of human history. So why? Why are we in this era of peace between big countries? There are a few theories. I mentioned nuclear deterrence, which is a big one. When both sides know that they'll be annihilated, they think twice before pulling the trigger. The logic of mutually assured destruction sounds insane, but it seems to work. Then there's economic interdependence. Going to war with your trading partners can backfire. Some give credit to global norms. The idea that international law, humanitarian rules, and public opinion make full-scale war politically toxic. I'm not really sure about that one, but it's a theory. Another one points to medical advances. In past wars, a gut wound might be certain death. Today, it might mean surgery or antibiotics and recovery. And some credit definitely needs to go to the overwhelming US military dominance in the world. It's not a moral thing, but when one country has a clear edge in military power, fewer people want to start a fight. So maybe peace isn't always about moral progress. Maybe it's about power too. So no, modern wars aren't killing more than ever. When we look at the percentage of the population who are being killed, or even looking at the raw numbers. In many ways, it's hard to see relative peace. We don't report about humans not killing each other, and we don't have a way to count the people who don't die in warfare. Still, I get that it can feel as though we're in the middle of a doomsday. Although we're losing fewer people to war, we're also more connected than ever. We get views of war that our ancestors never did. We doom scroll. Look, I don't think I'm an overly optimistic person, but often things are actually better than they seem. For instance, the FBI reports that 400,000 kids go missing each year in America, which sounds terrifying, and it spawned off so many conspiracy theories. But when I dug into those numbers too, I found a very different reality. Hey, thanks for watching. Come again.